Hello, Thought Roomies. For this week's podcast, I sat down with Shawn Slade, which is such a dope name. This episode was recorded remotely from Soltara Healing Center in Costa Rica, where I am currently stationed for 3 months. And I'm here chronicling the awe-inspiring tales of personal growth and healing from an array of guests and thought leaders that are coming through the center. Shawn, my guest this week, is the CEO of ReWild My Bio. He's also the co-founder and former co-owner of Booch Kombucha. And Shawn is a biohacking and rewilding expert who is also exploring a PhD with interest in nature-based medicine. If you don't know what rewilding or biohacking is, you are about to find out. If you already know what those things are, you will probably deepen your understanding and maybe pick up a few cool tricks. In this episode, Shawn and I talk about everything from Shawn's experience working with ayahuasca as a plant medicine to rites of passage and vision questing. Shawn also dives into some super cool, useful tips for both beginner and advanced biohackers, including ways to achieve better sleep and how to connect with a deeper sense of all-around well-being. I hope you enjoy this episode, and without further ado, let's step into the thought room. Shawn Slade, welcome to the Thought Room. How are you?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me.
So this is really exciting because you are officially the first guest on the Thought Room in the Soltara series. And we are recording right now from Costa Rica at Soltara Healing Center, which is a plant medicine center using traditional Shipibo healing using ayahuasca.
Right. Yeah. Here we are.
And you're here as a guest this week.
Yes. And I'm so happy to be here. Just a beautiful space. Like Soltara far exceeded my expectations. And it's the preparation that goes into everything here. And then to be doing this with you is like super exciting. You got me really excited about this. So yeah, thank you for having me on.
Awesome. So before we sat down, I was looking at a little bit about who you are, what you do. And I came across your stuff, and specifically the phrase rewilding your bio, or rewilding.
Yeah.
Rewild my bio is technically what it is, correct?
Right, yeah.
So what does that mean?
So it's a little bit of a play on words, which I had fun with. I don't even know actually now where it came to me from, but been wanting to get a podcast going for some time. And so the rewilding movement has kind of changed my life. It's been something I've been a part of or a champion of for at least the last 5 years. And so the whole idea with ReWild My Bio, it's going to be a podcast. And essentially the My Bio piece is my biology, but also at the same time my biography. So it is like a podcast that's coming from my experience rewilding. And I think it's important in this day and age because so many folks living in cities and that, and it's like, geez, how do I go about getting more in touch with nature, which so many people are looking for, right? So yeah, it's kind of a play on words. So very much my biology, because health promotion and all things holistic health has been my professional career throughout most of my life, having been a personal trainer, holistic nutritionist, and so yeah, your biology, I think, in this day and age, we're so disconnected from nature, and we're seeing so much disease and illness that's stemming from modern day living that I think if we were all to get more in touch with nature, we could kind of stop a lot of that disease and sickness, right?
Right. So even the term rewilding, I mean, for you in your work, it's ubiquitous, but there are people that are hearing this and they're hearing that phrase for the first time. Can you talk about what it means to rewild?
Yeah, for sure. So the rewilding movement, I mean, in environmental sciences, rewilding essentially, and if you were to look it up I think online, you'd probably see most likely the environmental science definition, which is kind of restoring natural spaces, right? So whether it be coming into clear-cut areas and letting nature take over, or just kind of reintroducing even like wild species that might have been extinct to a certain area and reintroducing them. So that's the one way, or the more common way you'd hear it. But lately there's been kind of a resurgence in human rewilding, right? Which is essentially using nature or getting back more in touch with nature for human health and growth, right? So for me, it goes right down to like our social structures, right? And kind of rewilding and getting more in touch with nature on all levels. There is a bit of like anarchism that comes with the rewilding movement, and a lot of folks kind of come from like green anarchism, where throwing away, say, like corporations and business as if it were a bad thing, which I don't necessarily, it doesn't really resonate with me, because I mean, if you're looking at ancient traditions and civilizations, commerce and trade has always been a part of it. And seeing as I have been an entrepreneur since, leaving university way back when, I think it's important to not throw that out. And I do believe that through entrepreneurship and through commerce, we can hopefully, if businesses are more in tune, or corporations are more in tune with nature, we can start to actually like heal the planet with businesses, rather than being a polluting bad thing that everybody says no to, right? So
totally. Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that both you and I are in that conscious business space.
Right.
I read somewhere, I believe online, that you actually have a really cool connection to the medicine meaning ayahuasca, and the genesis of the company that you co-founded.
That's right. You saw that, eh? Yeah, so that was a post. And again, kind of coming out of the psychedelic closet like so many people are lately. So that was like a big post for me. I'm sure like my aunts and uncles that follow me on like Instagram probably saw that and they're saying, "What are you doing down there?" But I'll tell them when I get back. But it's funny that you brought that up, because I had gone to Peru about 5 years ago in 2014. And it was with me and my now ex-wife. And we had done 3 ceremonies of ayahuasca in Pisac in the Sacred Valley. And it was through, so at this time, the idea was kind of out there that we would start this kombucha company. And it was actually a vision that she had, where she envisioned herself serving kombucha to people, to the masses.
So she went to Peru.
Yeah.
She drank ayahuasca.
Right.
Had a psychedelic experience of this vision of her serving people kombucha.
Right. Pretty far out, eh?
Yeah.
I know. It gives me goosebumps too, because it's very much like she's a wonderful kombucha brewer, and it was very much her idea to start this company. And at that time, I was kind of in between like school, essentially. So going from my master's to my PhD and having a business and economics degree, kind of putting businesses together was my thing after my personal training practice. So at that time, I said, this is the best vision I've heard of. We've got to do this, right? So it was at that time that we took the plunge. And from there, we created, I think, at the time, I had left the company because I'm now have sold my shares in the company. But it was, I think we were Canada's 4th largest kombucha company. So this is 2014, 2015 when we started. And it was kind of before the big kombucha boom, if you will. And
the kombucha.
Kombucha kaboom. Yeah, it was just that I couldn't get the idea out of my head. And I've had that idea before as like an entrepreneur, where it's like you get these ideas to invest in something, and just everything that we wanted to bring forward, and just to sell something that was really good. When working with clients as a nutritionist, I did a bunch of workshops at first. This is kind of what got the idea going. We would do workshops, I would do them on fermented foods, and people would try to make sauerkraut or kombucha, and then they'd be like, it tastes like feet, or, it just tastes horrible. And so it's like, well, can you just make some? So we started, she was making it, and we had basically jars like of kombucha all over our kitchen counter. And we have a small apartment, so it was just like, I kind of want my counter space back, so maybe we should actually like have a go at this, right? And so that's when we rented a small space, and then from there started selling at the local farmers market with a few local retailers, and then I guess now it's around 400 stores throughout Ontario. So
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a really great experience, great success story, and it kind of catapulted me into just entrepreneurship and working with different different startups, different incubators and things like that, where I've met so many great people from this. So again, the podcast kind of focusing in on that need for like small business and local entrepreneurship to propel new thoughts forward and provide things that people are in need of, right? The kombucha and fermented foods there's great health benefits to them.
Can you speak a little to that? Because I mean, kombucha is one of those things that has just taken off like avocado toast. Like it's just been like, it's right? trending and almost totally. In some ways like becoming basic.
No, it is. And I think, and thank you for even saying that, because it's, so that was when I decided to go back to finish my PhD. So my research throughout my master's and into my PhD was physical activity and sedentary behavior. So I put that on hold when the business kind of blew up, just to be able to manage that. And I then decided to switch topics and go into the health benefits of fermented foods. So it's amazing how little is out there in scientific literature on specifically kombucha. There's a lot done on yogurt, obviously, and Western University in London, Ontario, has a professor, Dr. Gregor Reed, who is behind the company Seed, which is a really cool probiotic capsule. But his research looks at a lot of places in Africa, essentially, where they're teaching women and communities how to make probiotic-rich yogurt. So it's a really great kind of hub of fermented foods there in London. So when I decided to switch to look at the health benefits of kombucha, there really was nothing on it. And really, I mean, that's just it. There is no science saying that it's good for us. And when you kind of look farther into probiotic and bacteria and gut health and things like that, it's starting to become just like yogurt. Like, this is a really good thing. We should all eat it or drink it. And it's as soon as you know it, like advertisers and marketers get a hold of it, and now everyone thinks they need to be drinking it, right? But there's actually nothing saying that the probiotics in kombucha are going to make it to your small intestine or large intestine, where they might be able to populate, good bacteria and a healthy overall microbiome. So there's actually not much out there to say that. And despite there being like good, different, it's somewhat acidic, so it is going to help as a digestive enzyme. So I mean, drinking kombucha, say like 15 minutes before a meal on an empty stomach, is a great way to get digestive enzymes working, so that you can actually break down your food and assimilate nutrients from it, right? So, but other than that, I mean, it's a healthy alternative to pop, really. So, I mean, hey, if so many folks in North America and the world are drinking different sodas and pop and things like that, I say pop because I'm from Canada, right? So soda, I should say, if folks from America or the US are listening. But so I mean, it's just a healthier alternative. And different ones are popping up. Now you see shelf-stable kombucha, which I think is kind of a scary thing, because essentially they're pasteurizing it, which is killing all those probiotics. So even if they are making it to where they need to be in our bodies, if you pasteurize it, it's going to be like dead and not full of. So you want the refrigerated raw kombucha, right? And even making it yourself is probably one of the best ideas, because then you know what's going into it. Some companies are putting like tons of sugar in it, which liquid sugar is not the best thing for your overall health. So, it is becoming like a thing, and it is better than drinking other things, right? So.
Well, and some people are now using it as an alternative to consuming alcohol. I mean, there's this whole movement of, and I have a friend too who owns a company called Curious Elixirs, and
okay, cool.
They make non-alcoholic kind of elixirs.
Amazing.
Infused with different herbs as an alternative to drinking alcohol, because especially in New York City or LA, like these big cities, it's let's go out for a coffee or let's go out for a drink. And if you don't drink, it's what do you do? But now, even my grocery store in Brooklyn has kombucha on tap, and kombucha is like coming on tap in bars and places like that, which is
it's so important, because I was just recently at Burning Man this year, actually, and I met somebody, doing this similar thing where it's just an elixir, and it was full of like nootropics and like tyrosine and all these things for my brain. So I had a late night before that, coming across it, and then here I am connecting with this other beverage company owner, talking about these amazing new products and things. And you're right, people need other alternatives to just drinking alcohol all the time. That said, it makes some pretty good like cocktails too, right? But if you want to add alcohol, but it's just amazing that that's even becoming a thing, right? So this is an example of like small business entrepreneurs kind of changing what we have access to if we want to be healthy, right?
Totally. So let's talk about your time here so far. I mean, we are halfway through the week. We're on Thursday, which means you've experienced 2 out of 4 of your ceremonies during your time here. This is not your first time working with the medicine. Let's
dive in.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the first 2 ceremonies, the first night was quite gentle. It was an introductory night, which I think is beautiful that they do that. We've got a lot of first timers here, and I'm by no means like a vet at this, and I don't think I'd ever become that. I don't even know if that's a thing, but anyways, yeah, it was nice and gentle, and it reminded me what it was all about, right? So it was kind of a night of training wheels, but I think it was like most definitely needed for everyone in the group, and even calmed my anxieties around that first ceremony, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I came here, kind of get into why I guess I came, because it's, it was coming here after 2 years of one of those dark times of the soul, and it was much needed for my health and healing, that I kind of let go of the past. So as I mentioned, ex-wife, I think earlier, and we started this company together, and it was challenging going through divorce, and it's something that I feel like I'm happy to talk about, because I think more people going through that need support, right? And they need to be able to let go and move forward. And the medicine obviously is a great way to do that. So, yeah, I came here with the intent that I would let go of past traumas, excuse me, past traumas, and that which I didn't need to hold on to anymore, right? So the first night I had set intentions to just kind of deal with some of my shit. And it was gentle, and the medicine here, and more so the healers, I think are a big part here. The whole Shipibo tradition, having done ceremonies before, it wasn't necessarily through the Shipibo tradition, and I think that having that lineage, there comes great power with that. And the maestros here are just amazing people, like sensing energies in the room and seeing how they work with individuals. I was just blown away that I came for the medicine, but little did I know that I'd be getting healers that would be just as important as the medicine that we'd be drinking. So it was truly amazing. And I'd say something that's amazing about this place is that they have this Shipibo lineage. So the second night, so 2 nights ago, that was the most challenging night of my life with psychedelics. Like I had some bookends experience of psilocybin that kind of came right before my separation, and then about 2 years after at Burning Man, actually. Not the best place to take a huge hero dose of psilocybin, especially on your first night, let me say. But it was very impactful and very purposeful, and those were challenging experiences. But I find with plant medicines, it's those, and you often may hear that it's those challenging ceremonies or times with the medicine that you get the most growth from, right? So my second night, it wasn't a training wheel dose. It was the real deal. And I had a beautiful beginning to the ceremony. It was, as the listeners may know, it's a psychedelic. So you having the geometric colors and shapes, and kind of connecting with with Mother Ayahuasca. As she came through, it was there was a lot of fear in that night, and my intention really was around like sadness and anger and things like that. So I was kind of really like I came to face fears, and I didn't think they'd be thrown right at me like that, right? So it was very challenging. And when one of the healers came around to sing an Akiro to me, I felt as though I kind of sobered up. And though seeing like demons throughout the beginning of the ceremony, I was able to kind of like sober up with clear mind, say, you know what, I'm going to need a second dose. So took a second dose, which is something I've never done before. And I kind of have somewhat of like a fast metabolism and a lower tolerance to psychedelics. I really don't, I connect with spirit through my like shamanic journeying practice and other things. So taking medicine for me is a real big amplifier. So I'm cognizant of that. And I said, you know what, this is necessary. I came here to face fears, so let's do it. And so I was very brave, went up for a second cup. And then from then it was one of those experiences that always terrified me with psychedelics. And it's like, I don't want to have that, but like, I still know that there's benefit to it. But it was one of those like ego death experiences where I thought to myself, like, really, I'm going to die. And it's like, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to die. Like, I knew that medicine's safe, and it's not like it's, some type of chemical pharmaceutical that I'm it's even possible. So, and I was in a safe space, but I literally got that overwhelming fear, like I'm going to die. And then luckily here at Soltara, they give you a wonderful book that's all about integrating and kind of tips and tricks, which is an amazing thing about 2019 compared to 2014, because there is so much more research, and I'm not say science with ayahuasca, but there is so much more on how to navigate plant medicine. So I think was very helpful. And then in that book, it said if you feel like you're going to die, ask, what in me is dying? So I was able to at least get that question out. What is me in dying? And boom, I got the quick feeling and answer that it's your desire to control. And I said, fine, this can die in me, because this is something, as you know, a kind of left brain, get shit done mentality kind of guy. Control is something that I think a lot of folks, myself included, try to have on our natural environment. But and again, kind of getting back to the theme of my podcast, it's rewilding is very much nature doesn't grow in straight, rigid lines. It's not meant to be controlled. When you let something go wild, it's going to just grow whichever way it needs to, right? So, okay, fine. Like, I'm happy to let go of that. So as soon as, and actually then I kind of got the message, good, because you can't control this. And it was kind of almost in like a laughing way that I received that. So I was like, yeah. And again, in these experiences, it might sound terrifying for a lot of folks, but it's, as soon as you're able to get these messages, you're flooded with peace. It's like you're almost rewarded by doing the brave work and saying, let's do this. And it was, just overwhelming peace kind of came over me. Okay, this part of me is dying. Good. So the rest of the night went on, and it was still some challenges here and there, but I was able to kind of dive into other questions and that. But again, like the love that was in the air that night, because one of our participants did have a challenging night, and luckily the healers were able to kind of go over there at the end of what seemed like the end of the ceremony. They kept it going for like an hour after, and just giving so much love and care. And you could see people sitting up, smoking mapacho, and just doing what they could to like hold space for this individual and just send love. And like, it brought a tear to my eye, because it's like literally you could cut the love with a knife in the room. It was just again, this medicine is just, seeing as I've been in the health promotion space and the health field for some time, I just don't know why it isn't more readily available, especially in the West. I mean, I think coming down here and doing it a traditional way is good, and I think there's a lot of ethical questions we need to ask before that happens. But I find it, and this is what I said last time after my first round of ceremonies, is that, say, like blood pressure medication, for example, we in the West love to just take blood pressure medication and just keep living our lives in a way that's destructive to whatever it is that's causing high blood pressure. Whereas with ayahuasca or plant medicines, it can knock you on your ass, and you're purging and you're seeing your demons. But this is a one night thing, and it's over, and then it's like you're getting healing, you're getting cured, you're being, air quotes, like fixed, right? Like it's way more effective. So it's like, why are we taking medications that kind of do what you're looking to do, and making pharmaceutical companies quite wealthy in the process, and but we could be doing these things from nature that are able to kind of help us out with this stuff, literally in like one night or a few ceremonies. So
right,
it was just it was awesome.
I mean, I think the problem you're describing is it's a pandemic, really. And even growing up with two parents as chiropractors, I remember specifically this one poster in my parents' office of an iceberg. And it's the ocean, this big icy ocean, and the iceberg, and you can just only see the tip of the iceberg coming above the water, and then below, there's the photo continues below the water, and you can see this mammoth piece of the iceberg, probably like what happened with the Titanic. They didn't see the whole thing, right?
Right.
And the caption is talking about symptoms being the tip of the iceberg. Right. So it's just like what you see, how it's expressing. And oftentimes when we get a headache, we take an Advil. Mm-hmm. We're like, okay, my headache is better. Right. Okay, well, you've effectively just covered over the symptom.
Right.
Maybe you had a headache because you were dehydrated.
Right.
maybe there's something else going on somatically that you need to pay attention to, or you've been overworked,
Right.
and we're just covering it up and covering it up and covering it up. So I think that that's happening in pretty much every corner
Right.
of our Western society
Right.
at the moment.
Yeah, just always quick fixes, right? And it's never addressing the root cause, for sure.
Speaking of quick fixes, so we were talking about this a little bit before. You were saying 2 of your biggest passions are 1, rewilding, which we touched on, and 2, biohacking,
Right.
which, I would love if you would also define for people who are unfamiliar with that, and also this kind of ironic dichotomy of loving the 2 of those things.
Right. So I think me and my personal trainer friends, we would just call biohacking shit personal trainers do. But lately, it's actually, I think, in Webster's dictionary. And do I even have it here still? I think I do. Yeah, it's right here. So, it says the biological experimentation as by gene editing or the use of drugs or implants done to improve the qualities or capabilities of living organisms, especially by individuals and groups working outside a traditional medical or scientific research environment. Okay. So, it's another way of just saying, like, it's altering your environment to have an impact on your biology, right? So that's essentially biohacking. And like I kind of already explained with rewilding, it's kind of doing the same thing, but using nature as the main means to getting there. So I do see a dichotomy, and hence like my excitement to do this podcast, where you're kind of taking 2 things that might seem opposite. And some might even like argue otherwise. Like I know like Ben Greenfield, for example, a very famous biohacker. He is kind of, now I'm hearing in his like lexicon, more adapting things that are, or using things that are closer mimicking nature, which I think is great. But I also think like, well, again, someone like Ben is on the upper spectrum of like the 1%ers that are using biohacking as a means to health and healing. So doing things from like stem cell injections to like hyperbaric chambers and a whole bunch of crazy gadgets and things, which again, if you're looking at rewilding, and I think a lot of the folks with even that anarchist kind of undertone to rewilding would somewhat oppose that, right? I would argue that there's a lot of similarities in both. And I think we can use, and again, like a lot of people are living in cities. I have the luxury of being in Ontario with access to like nature and lakes and things like that. But I think folks that are living in cities don't have access to this stuff. And I also think that, when it comes to disease, say, you can't necessarily just walk your way through nature and get rid of like cancer. It's going to be a very important piece of it. And I think it should be a foundation. And this is just after years of working with clients and things like that. Having been like a Czech practitioner and working with Paul Czech, and at the same time, someone like say Charles Poliquin, who was anyways very much into supplementation and things like that, and getting results faster. So I think that we have to kind of, like all things, stop the polarization and kind of merge these 2 fields. And I do think that I think there's tons of similarities. And I think that things like, what types of things that I was looking at here earlier, I was writing things down. Yeah, like, so this Aura ring that I'm wearing, for example, this is a great way to measure your heart rate variability, which kind of shows us our connection with the natural world around us. So your heart rate variability is going to kind of be the balance of like protons and neutrons and how stressed out your body is. So if I can use something like this to tap in and see exactly how my surroundings or my environment is impacting my biology, then great, it's technology. And I think a lot of folks in rewilding might throw out the idea of like something like this or something like supplementation. But you have to, I guess, remember that we've been grinding up powders and potions since the beginning of time, to whether it's like a superfood or some type of herb or plant medicine that's going to help us. I think it's kind of, it's part of the human experience, is having supplementation and things like that. So I think it shouldn't necessarily be thrown apart. There's other things too, like what are some other similarities?
Is the Aura ring used for sleep as well?
Yeah, it's a sleep tracker essentially. So that's the main purpose, and they've got an algorithm that will tell you basically your readiness for your day. So based on your sleep,
there's like a percentage or some kind of.
I don't know how the algorithm
analytic,
right? That it will tell you based on your like deep sleep, REM sleep, and light sleep, and based on your physical activity level, and it takes trends over time. So it's a neat way of kind of over the course of time, it can kind of get used to what your normal is. So if say I don't get sleep, like the other night when I was after the ceremony, it's like, hey, I think today you better chill out. So I went to yoga and just totally ended up having to relax after it, because it was just like not my day for yoga, or at least a yoga in like tropical climates when you're fair-skinned redhead. It was just a little too hot for me, you know? So
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think there's lots of important similarities. But like really like things like, what are some other points? I think the time piece is something to be aware of with like, I think there's a dichotomy with biohacking and rewilding in that like, yeah, biohacking, a lot of times you're seeking to get results faster. And rewilding, it's a lot slower. So again, I think sustainably...
Like intentionally slowing.
Yeah, slowing, right? And kind of getting in touch and being okay with that. And I think that's more sustainable for a lot of people because we're trying to sometimes achieve something out of our biology that might not be possible when you're using a lot of different biohacking gadgets and that, right? There was another one that I was thinking of earlier, which is the spirituality piece, which in my personal experience, having been a Czech practitioner for some time, we focus on physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. So in my 20s anyways, I wasn't so keen on using the term spiritual health with clients because I didn't even know what that was for myself, right? And I think that now that I've kind of gotten a grasp on my spiritual practice and my connection to source and everything, I think that the biohacking space is really missing a very key important piece to health. So if I were to just, identify as a biohacker or something like that, I think you're going to get so entrenched in like, your physical health and buying all these gadgets and trying to get somewhere fast. That's just not sustainable without, I think, the most important piece of your health, which is having a good, strong connection to God, right? So by embracing the rewilding movement, which again, doesn't even necessarily permeate that space, the spiritual aspect. I think it is becoming more so now, but I think a lot of folks who have just been really into like, hey, I'm gonna go light a fire with like a bow drill or
Flint
something
and
like
steel,
that.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, something like that, trying to make fire by friction. And I think there's much more to rewilding than just getting, living out under the woods. Because at the end of the day, like here we are on a podcast. I love my iPhone. I love technology. And I think technological advances tools have always been a part of the human story. So now we have different tools. So if we can mimic nature because we don't get to spend much time in nature, good. But if we're missing out on key pieces of connectivity to the natural world around us, then I think we're really missing out on a very important piece, right? So
Right, because you can only really simulate so much.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any like biohacks for like spirit. Like again, like I think maybe my allure to plant medicine is, and it's often said sometimes that it's like 5 to 10 years of meditation in one night, which I can see that, and I don't want to make that like a slogan or anything, as it is. It's not a quick fix by any means, because having worked with it before, 5 years later, I'm back here doing it again, right?
Right.
It's a process that slowly starts unraveling and peeling off layers of the onion to you kind of really integrating and walking that path, right?
I'm glad you brought this up, because this is a thing that's common to talk about in the medicine space, but sometimes people have perceptions that you're going to come, you're going to do a medicine like this, and you're going to be cured.
Yeah.
And at least, in my time here at Soltara, it's really clear that they put the emphasis on integration and how important that period is. And one of the criticisms I've heard about this plant medicine is, well, my friend so-and-so did it once, they had all these breakthroughs, but like, why do they have to keep going back? Like right. They keep going into the same space. And it's honestly very aligned with what my parents would see in their chiropractic practice as far as criticism, which is, well, I went and I had my spine cracked and then it just keeps going back. Yeah. Right? Because it's like, we have muscle memory, we have structural issues. Yes, we can get them corrected, but if we're not vigilant, things slide.
Oh, totally.
There is the most important work, in my opinion, happens during that integration process, for sure.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like life happens, right? Like, I mean, after leaving, the ceremonies in Peru in 2014, I've lived a very blessed life, and a lot of good came from that. But guess what? Life happens, and then divorce or this, that, the other thing, and it's like you need to have a sit down every now and then. And sometimes you just need I heard actually Bill Pfeiffer, a mentor of mine who I've done some workshops with, he had said, sometimes you just need a good kick in the ass. Like, yeah, you do sometimes, right? And then getting back to your routine, because I was like not taking my medicine, right? Leading up to.
And when you use the phrase "taking my medicine," you mean like your self-care practice, or your...
the whole gamut of self-care for sure, right? Yeah, not exercising regularly or vigorously, say, enough to elicit like a good health benefit, eating comfort foods and things like that. Like being a owner of a startup business that's taking off, it's kind of easy to lose yourself when you're just like managing a million different things, right? So it's so I mean, you always kind of need those times, and spirit or God or however you want to say it will have ways of saying like, okay, you're gonna hit the brakes right now, whether you like it or not, right? So it's I mean, I'm grateful for that now, but it's a hard lesson to learn, right?
Yeah. Going back to biohacking a little bit, I know that most people are familiar now, like especially iPhone just came out with that dark mode, and
oh, they did.
yeah,
I didn't know they did. Cool.
Yeah, so there's that dark mode feature now, and people know about blue light stuff a little bit, and how it's good to dim your screens to a warmer tone before bed to fall asleep. But what are some of the things in the biohacking space? And if you could, maybe you can speak to like beginner and then like intermediate and advanced for people who are listening who want to try some gadgets or want to try some practices for biohacking.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would probably start that by saying a good health routine at the beginning. Like, so, I mean, I'm talking like a meditation practice, exercising and eating healthy are going to be very important, right? Like first and foremost, if you start going out and spending all your money on a bunch of gadgets, without doing the basics, you're kind of wasting your money, right? So I think that's first and foremost. But yeah, I would say like, the new smoking is, I think in the health space is going to be, junk electromagnetic frequencies. So, like 5G, is coming, I guess, and at least in North America, and yes, things like electromagnetic frequencies that are disrupting cell, regeneration and whatnot, I think are going to be more and more talked about. And I guess this is kind of upper end of the spectrum. I guess we'll start there. But like pulse electromagnetic frequency devices that can essentially mimic the electromagnetic frequency of nature as being very important. So there's the Schumann resonance, which is essentially the Earth has a vibration, which is around 7.83 hertz, I think, or something like that. And so like a good walk on the beach is amazing. So I live in a town called Port Stanley. I have Lake Erie right there. So when I'm reading and writing, I get to take my like mid-afternoon walk, and I'm literally barefoot on the beach, and I'm connecting with a lower frequency rather than sitting in front of my computer getting all jazzed up and everything. So again, there's the rewilding alternative, then there's the biohacking alternative, which is some of these PEMFs. One, aren't necessarily the best. Two, they're very expensive, the good ones.
Like there's beds, right? There's PEMF beds. My parents actually own one at their retreat center in Canada.
Oh, really?
It's called Cranberry Island Retreat Center. Okay. And so they have one. They have a PEMF bed. I've actually used it. Nice. It's really interesting.
How was it? I don't know. Like, what would you?
I only used it a couple of times, and it kind of, you can also punch in what your ailment is too, and it will use specific frequencies based on that. Right. So if you want to punch in kidney or chronic stress and things like that, and then you put a heart rate monitor on, and it kind of uses those analytics and feeds back through to make adjustments about how you're responding to the frequency.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
I would love to try one. Yeah. I've used it only, I've done some neurofeedback, going in the last couple of years, as a way to kind of retrain my brain around some of the stresses and depression that I've been dealing with. And he had one, and it was amazing because you put that thing on your head basically, and it would
it's like a cap, right, with all these electrodes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it basically just, the PEMF would kind of just like put your brain into like an alpha brainwave state or a theta brainwave state, and it totally just knocks the chatter, like the end of the day chatter, which I seem to have. And it's just, would literally just kind of like set a clean slate, and then you would do your session of neurofeedback after, and it would be quite amazing. Yeah,
my parents also have neurofeedback machines, and it's really cool. I mean, for those who have never heard about it or seen it, I recommend looking it up. But they essentially, they do the initial scan, but then they put you on like a protocol. And so you go for these neurofeedback sessions, and based on, say, you have high alpha or your beta, or wherever the correction needs to be, like if you have a very anxious personality, there's a certain type of brainwave that is, kind of off the charts. And then it's really cool. They actually, at least the one that we have, is you get to choose like a movie or something that you want to watch. Is that the
right?
Was that been your experience?
I flew an eagle. He like gave me a choice. I'm like, well, eagle's like a spirit I like resonate with. So I'm like, yeah, I want to fly an eagle through like a bunch of like hula hoops, basically, with my brain.
Right.
It's like the coolest video game going. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So there's video games, or there's like sometimes you get to choose, like we put Planet Earth on sometimes, and you're watching, and when your brain waves go out of the desired amplitude, I suppose, the picture and the sound will actually, like the picture will dim and get less clear, and then the sound gets kind of muffled, and then your brain goes, oh, I'm supposed to be here. It's like conditioning.
Totally. For
and
your
that's
brain.
the wrap. And then so you go back for these sessions, and then over time you can kind of create these scaffolded shifts in your brain functioning.
Yeah. No, it was powerful stuff for sure. The other one, I guess I'll go to some of the more accessible things. And again, like there's always a lifestyle hack. Or something you can do in your life prior to this. But I mean, even things like, so I'm a PhD student and all my work is sitting at a desk. So I mean, even things just like changing the space and getting like a sit-stand desk is a big one, right? Or having like blue light blocking glasses is something I also will wear, right? So in the evening, ideally like blue lights will essentially suppress melatonin production in our bodies, so that helping you sleep. It's ideal that when the sun goes down, I'll throw my blue light blocking glasses on, and I'm essentially only seeing red, right? So much like, again, so if we relate that to nature, much like the sun going down in the last hour of of the day, you're able to kind of get more of like the red spectrums coming through. So again, you're kind of telling your brain, okay, it's time to sleep. So even if I'm like crushing it, writing papers and stuff, I'm able to at least mitigate the negative impact of the blue lights, right? So, and even to that point too, it's like my grounding pad, which is something that I really enjoy. So it's like I have a grounding pad on.
What's a grounding pad?
So essentially, it's a mat that I'm plugging into the ground of my plug, and it's essentially kind of cutting, or it's mimicking that which would be similar if you were to be walking barefoot on the ground, right? So having a negative...
The frequency.
Yeah, the frequency, right? So having negative proton or negative ions anyways that are a lot more calming to the nervous system, right? Rather than the protons that are going to be like...
So it's like walking barefoot, but indoors.
But indoors, yes, right? So I mean, and these are the things that I think, again, I have to be indoors. I can't take my office outside. It's Canada. It's like we got snow at home right now. So so it's like nice that I'm able to at least, mimic nature while I'm indoors doing my day-to-day urban grind, right? So it's, so I mean, things like that I think are accessible. What else really? I don't know. Those are I'd say like the most accessible ones and the ones that I use regularly. But yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about all this, especially with the bedtime stuff. I think I've been inadvertently biohacking for a while with my bedtime routine, because I always, almost like you would put a child to bed, I basically do that to myself. Like I'll go around the whole place, turn off all the lights, and just like light a candle or a very dim light that's not an overhead lighting or no fluorescence. And I keep it like that, I want it like that for at least an hour before I'm going to bed. I'm turning off all electronics.
Yeah, that's an important one for sure. And then even like the temperature of your room, right? Like, so since I got this Oura Ring, I knew that I'd be getting like, so having 2 years in nature, I'm like, I don't want to lose that, like the benefit on my physiology from this last 2 years of just, being at my parents and they have 10 acres of Southern Ontario Carolinian forest. So it's just being able to be in that, and it's been great medicine for me. But now that I'm, back to the grind, so to speak, it's like I need to make sure my sleep stays really well. So having slept outdoors a lot, I think now it's like, well, I want to make sure that I'm mimicking that. So having like a cooler temperature at night in your house too. My friend...
Because that helps you sleep? Yeah,
essentially. So looking at like, 65 degrees or 18 degrees, 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius, but having a cooler temperature at night. So there's things like a chili pad, which is a company that basically it's a mat that goes down on your bed and it pumps cold water and it goes through. And so again, like if you're thinking back how we evolved, we didn't always have comfy, cushy mattresses made of like metal and all these other things, right? So to be able to have a bed that's, made of like natural fibers and things like that, or having this grounding sheet that I also have on my bed. And then with the chili pad, it's like it's like I'm sleeping outside on like on some ferns or not, something that's nice and cushy, I guess, anyways.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've heard of those gravity blankets getting really popular. Have you heard of gravity blankets? It's essentially, I mean, I don't want to overglorify it. It's a weighted blanket.
Oh, really?
And there's something about the weight of it that helps people fall asleep. I guess there's something really grounding about being wrapped in something a little bit heavier, and it makes sense to me.
Right,
like
yeah,
I think about when we were sleeping in caves with like buffalo or bear skins thrown over us.
Interesting,
yeah.
No, I know, and that's just it. Like it's easy to kind of be like, oh, well, we evolved like this. Obviously, our biology can change quite fast, and I mean, I think in the last couple generations, we're realizing that we are changing, adapting to our current environment. But when you've got like the most of human evolution evolving in like you say, sleeping like that, it just makes sense, right? So like even infrared, having infrared exposure to infrared light, like it wasn't until just over 100 years ago or so now that electricity has become a thing. So we don't have to have fire or fireplaces at night anymore. So it's actually it's quite detoxifying for the body that we are by, say, like infrared lights that come from fire and things like that. And we don't have that anymore, right? So even just having like an infrared sauna, access to that, or if it's, if you have an infrared sauna at your gym or something like that, it's worth, I mean, you can get the benefits of a really intense workout in 20 minutes in a good infrared sauna, right? So
there's something about the heat shock proteins. Do you know anything about that?
Right, yeah, for sure. So I mean, when it comes to like cold plunges and infrared saunas, they're really great ways at helping us with heat shock proteins, and we're going to be able to essentially control our autonomic nervous system a little bit more, so our fight or flight. So by jumping in, like say a cold plunge, we're kind of more easily able to kind of keep our nervous system from overly exciting all the time, essentially, right?
This is really fascinating because in my experience talking to a few people who are in this biohacking space or are avid meditators, I found both of those groups of people, and of course this is just purely my opinion, both of those groups of people have reported an easier experience working with psychedelics.
Oh, really?
Because there's something about, when you're putting yourself intentionally into, say you take cold showers in the morning and it's a training. It's like the first time you do it, you're like, ooh, this is really cold. Your whole body tenses up and you're really uncomfortable. But then you maybe employ something like Wim Hof breathing, where you're being intentional about how you're doing it and you tell your body it's okay, even though it's feeling uncomfortable. You're like, this is okay. This is actually good. This is fine.
So true, right? Yeah.
Same with meditation. Your head's going crazy all over and you're just able to bring it back in. It can be a really useful tool in the psychedelic space.
I never really thought about the crossover there, but you're totally right, because I think nowadays we just want comfort, right? And I mean, all around the world, when I'm lucky enough to have traveled some places and you see folks looking for more comforts like we have in the West, and it's like they're like, I'm like running down the hill saying, go back, and they're trying to get the new latest and greatest inventions that are just going to kind of make us lazy, right, and overly comfortable. But yeah, like that's life, and that's kind of that part of that rewilding philosophy is that there's winter and then there's summer, there's night and there's day. It's the yin and the yang, and to just experience comfort all the time, we're basically like evolving into really, really soft human beings that are less likely to be able to fight disease and illness when it pops up, right? So
this comfort topic is really interesting to me because I'm thinking about my experience as a teacher in private schools. I used to teach at a Rudolf Steiner school, so a Waldorf school.
Right on.
And those parents were fantastic for the most part. And
totally.
But with what I was seeing so I had worked in some public schools too, but what I was seeing was sometimes this trend of really coddling our children, right?
Yeah.
So like the previous generation had pretty like authoritarian parents and things were very strict. So we had this entire backlash to the parenting being like, oh, I'm going to be friends with my child. I'm going to ask them every single thing that they would. What do you want to eat? You know, what time would you like to go to bed?
Yeah.
There's some things, in my opinion, that the parent needs to make the decision on because children, psychologically speaking, feel a little bit more insecure when they're given more than is developmentally appropriate.
Right.
So I think that that's really interesting what you say about comfort, because I think that is spilling into sort of all corners again of our society. And it's really important that we find a little bit of balance with that and encourage resilience in the generation that's coming up.
Well, that's just it. There is no more rites of passage. It's like, yeah, you can do whatever you want from whatever age you are. And if you're looking at, like, again, cultures as we grow, like there was always like rites of passage throughout different stages of life, right? So you need to develop, the different things are being developed at different stages of our life. So, I mean, I just recently did a vision quest in May. Yeah. So it was, wow.
Who did you do that through?
So I did that through, it's basically the Tom Brown Jr.
Oh yeah. Okay. Great.
That lineage that, so in Ontario, there's a lovely place called Rewilding Healing Center. Okay. I'm a member of one of their courses called the Gateway to the Shaman Within. And, it's not necessarily part of that, but they used to run it. It's a lovely couple, Chuck and Sandy, and they used to run them, but they're older now. So they've just recently passed it off to a friend of mine and another elder gentleman who actually also taught at the Waldorf School. But anyways, they took us out in the woods, and it was 4 days, 4 nights, fasting from everything familiar except for water. And I was in a 10 by 10 space, and it's like, talk about nature medicine. It was very, very profound. I'd say, no psychedelics involved, but like, you're, a bug or a leaf falls and you're looking at it and you see the most vibrant colors and you just become so grateful and appreciative because, again, you're faced with this uncomfortable challenge of like, and it was like end of April, beginning of May, Northern Ontario, which, if you're not familiar, it's not necessarily warm yet. It's very cold, and we even had snow on one of the nights, right? So, talk about discomfort and dealing with the challenges. And from that, like again, that kind of got me out of that. Like, I mean, it was a slow process coming out of, say, depression and things like that, but it was, that moment was very impactful for me, for sure.
I love that we're talking about rites of passage for many reasons. One is, I said before, you and I are both in the conscious business space. The company that I started is called Lunar Wild, and it's a rites of passage gift for young women when they first start menstruating. Oh, wow. So the idea for that company actually came to me in 2017 in May when I went on a vision quest.
Oh, you did?
Myself.
Oh, no way.
So I did that through a company or an organization called Rites of Passage Vision Quest.
Cool.
I think they're rebranding now because they felt like the name was a bit appropriating. But that's what it was called then. And I did that outside of Death Valley in California. And shortly before I came to Costa Rica, I actually was posting on Instagram something about, I feel like this is the beginning of Hallie 3.0. Like after my time here at this medicine center, I'm going to be a new version of myself. But Hallie 2.0 really came after the Vision Quest. It was similar. I think I fasted for maybe like 80 hours, only water and solo, completely nobody, no phone. I was in the high desert, so there weren't trees. It was just like scraggly sage bushes and really large boulders. And I remember on the packing list, there was no tent, right? And I was like, oh, okay. But there's a tarp and a rope. So I was trying to envision, okay, so there's probably going to be trees. That's where I'm going to tie my tarp and I got there and I was like, how am I going to do this? And I mean, I had been camping and things like that, but nothing of this magnitude. And I'm just like up on these boulders, like trying to lash my rope around, and you get one piece of rope and you're by yourself. Nobody else around. There's base camp, of course, which is, like maybe a mile or so away, but I'm like, if I cut this rope wrong,
Yeah.
I'm screwed.
Oh,
yeah. And it hailed once in the desert.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, at least you got like warmth. It sounds like warmth.
No, it was super warm in the day, like sunburn, and then freezing at night.
That would be the contrast would be a challenge for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I luckily had like a nice cedar tree that I got to make friends with, and got my tarp and everything.
That sounds a little bit less harsh as far as the climate goes.
Right.
But yeah, a super, super transformative experience. Again, no psychedelics involved in that, but you really don't need it. I mean, when you've been fasting for that long, and maybe you want to talk about this and maybe you relate, but I just feel like something opens up in you. This sensitivity opens up and things start to just bubble to the surface when you're not thinking about what you have to go to the grocery store and then what you're going to cook and then how you're going to clean up and how you sit when there's no food. You have a lot of time.
It's great. And that's just it. I think I mentioned like that ceremony the other night, having that like little mini ego death experience. And like, I had like the same, or I'd say similar, like very similar medicines, just nature and then the ayahuasca. But like, I had a little mini ego death there too, where I was able to like at least bring to the surface stuff that identified myself. That's like, I just don't want this anymore. Right. So, and it's not comfortable. And that was like day 4. So it's like, I'm, on wit's end at the end of this vision quest and it's like, there it came. And it was like very impactful. And it's something that's, I brought into these ceremonies, and it really, again, just nature medicine, is something that we don't often hear about. We don't often hear about anything medicine other than pharmaceutical drugs and things like that. But there's so much medicine around us, whether it's the elements or the directions or whichever resonates with us, right? But I think, nature is just super important that we need to kind of get back to it, right?
The rites of passage thing, again, I've talked about this before, I think on the podcast, where it's something I'm super passionate about because it's just not here in Western culture. And I think about youth. I think about young men. I think about young women too. Obviously, that's why I started Lunar Wild. But I think about young men and how difficult it is to be a man right now in the landscape of what's going on. And, rightly so, there's a lot of anger in some, for women in certain areas. I'm of the camp that anger is not really the antidote to our problems. And we need to be vigilant but patient in educating each other. Right. It really has to be this co-creation between men and women, and to kind of move forward with our balance of the masculine feminine energies in this global healing that really needs to take place. But what I'm seeing is that there's no elders in the community. There's no people to be like, well, because you don't always go to your parents, and you don't want to always go to your parents. And so who's the person who's maybe you get lucky and you have like a really wise uncle or a grandfather who's cool and down to earth, but probably not.
Right.
And so our young people are just out there trying to figure. We're all out there just trying to figure it out.
Especially the young people, like in that age, like early 20s and that.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's so important.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were talking before even about your experience with your divorce and men and how it felt as a man and the shame surrounding something like that and how ubiquitous that is too.
Well, that's just it. It's supposed to be a rite of passage, but anymore. It wasn't like that for me, but like marriage becomes something we just go and do at the local city hall, and it's no big deal. Like that should be a ceremony and a big time to celebrate in your life, right? And it's not anymore. Like whether it be our parents that maybe we don't feel like we can go to, or there was no rites of passage at home, even down to like graduating university. It's just like something you do. It's not like, oh, good for, like, sure, everyone's happy for you in that, but it's really like no substance behind it anymore. And I think you can get similar experiences traveling the world or coming to a place like this as a rite of way more impactful anyways, unless I guess the intent's behind university as being a rite of passage, but I don't think it is like that anymore. It's like something you better do to get a job, right? So in all facets of life, we've really lost the rites of passage. So
I'm thinking about relationships, and in particular on my flight over here to Costa Rica, I sat next to this couple who had been together for 43 years.
Nice.
43 years. And I was sitting there, I was like, damn.
Yeah.
You don't really see that anymore. And just thinking about my own journey with relationships and how I've been single for a really long time, and the stories in my head about my inability to, like, why would I? No, that seems like too much. And I asked them, what is the secret?
Great question. Yeah.
To a long marriage, a long relationship. They had a couple things to say. One was, the woman said, men and women see things differently. And sometimes you just have to resolve to the fact that, hey, we see this differently.
Right, yeah.
Like, we're experiencing this viscerally differently.
Right.
And she's like, agree to disagree.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that, we're always, that's the cold shower.
Yeah,
It's like two things happening at once. It's like, this feels really bad, but it's okay.
Right. No, totally.
Right.
Oh, no, and I guess that's something I didn't learn, but no, I think, and again, you're talking about the masculinity and bringing back that sacred masculinity where, yes, it's a good time. It's very important for a man to step into that sacred masculinity and say lead, but at the same time, it's very important to step back and listen or compromise, right? So it's just having the yin and the yang. And I think so many men are feeling under attack for like just being macho and that, but it's to be soft and sensitive and vulnerable and open, which is something I've always embraced in my life, having, being in touch with my feminine side and as well as just being more of a motherly person. I think it's just important to realize you gotta compromise and you have to embrace the feminine in order to truly be like a strong man. And it doesn't mean that you're gonna be a wimp or whatever you want to call yourself, right? But it's just so important, and it's just, I feel like it's under attack. Yeah
absolutely. And I know even in the space that I work in with a lot of female entrepreneurs, there's this kind of, I think, a backlash to a lot of women having to stay at home, being told that's all they could do in previous decades. And now it's like women are out there working, and it's like CEO, and it's this whole thing that people are actually rallying behind. And I was having this thing with it because I was like, well, I am a CEO, but I also someday really want to be a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
And I'm really excited about that. And I felt like a little bit of shame for myself, even in my circles of these really strong, empowered CEO women. It was like, I'm not going to tell them that because then it seems like I'm... So isn't that so interesting?
Yeah, on both sides of the coin. No, for sure. And I think we have to embrace both sides of it to fully be whole, right? So it's... And that's a very deep, like going back to the rewilding, like that is a very deep desire or like impulse for women to have. And it's a beautiful thing. Where would we be without it, right? Like I have a very loving mom who was a stay-at-home mom and was able to do that, and I've benefited greatly. But I think at the other time, it's being able to embrace change and step out and be seen as a CEO, as you say. And I think it's important to find your calling, I guess, whatever feels right for you, and do it in whatever way, and feel no shame. If I'm a sensitive guy that wants to be vulnerable and open with my buddies, then so be it. And same thing on the other side, right? Yeah, totally.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned in working with, this medicine, other medicines, but in relation to people, what's been revealed to me is it's far more complicated than it looks on the surface. And everything is okay. Meaning whatever you see in front of you, the human being you see in front of you, whatever they're expressing, however it's landing with you, whether you like it, whether you don't, it's actually perfect. Like it's actually warranted. It's their journey. You only suffer if you attach to it. Right. And we do have a responsibility, I think, to share our truth, but I really believe it should not be done in a dogmatic sort of way, where we're actually trying to convert people to whatever. And I think it's really important to speak authentically and from your own experience in order to do that, and then let people have the choice. But for me, it's like, you do that, you love that, awesome.
Right.
You do that? Cool. I know nothing about that. Or
Right.
I tried that once and I had a funny experience, but maybe I'm willing to hear about it again.
Right.
You know, just that
it's so true.
willingness, that curiosity.
And it just doesn't exist in this day and age. And that's like, I'd say that's mastery, being able to like not engage in like, oh, well, you know, us versus them mentality. It's, I mean, working with the medicine here and kind of going into tonight's ceremony, for me, it's finding that unconditional love and not that like us versus them mentality. And it just like permeates Western culture right now. We just had an election in Canada, and the election's coming in the States, and you just see this polarization of everything. And it's just like, what are we even what are we even attacking each other for, really, right? It's just, everyone just wants to kind of get in with their camp and just stick with that. I'm just finishing Brené's Brown book, Into the Wilderness, or I forget the book, but she does a really good job. I've never came across any of her stuff until this book.
Oh, she's great.
Yeah, it was right before the Vision Quest, and I grabbed it. I'm like, Braving the Wilderness. That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so I grabbed it, and I was like, this is amazing. I actually haven't finished it yet, but still, she kind of gets right into what we're talking about as to folks just kind of putting up walls and barriers. And it's just, in a day where we can be more connected through podcasts and the internet and things like that, we're actually becoming more separate and alone, because I'm just going to follow the vegans or the paleos or the hashtag this or that. And it's very, divisive, and it's not for the best, right?
Oh, that's so true. I never really considered that. It's like now there's this whole level of curating our own experience. It's like, oh, I see something on my feed that I don't like or isn't relevant. Okay, unfollow.
Yeah. No, I know, right? And it's like, I purposely seek out, if I'm into something, I'm going to seek out the absolute opposite. Maybe that's just like the academic curiosity in me, but it's like, again, if you do think something is for the better and it's how you want to live your life, then like fully become aware of every aspect of it, not just the stuff that supports your dogma or your belief or whatever, right? Like challenge beliefs, challenge them often, and even do it to yourself, right? And I think we're losing that because, again, we're getting comfortable with like, hey, I'd rather just be part of this trend or group or whatever it is, right? So yeah, it's not for the best, for sure.
It reminds me of the book called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Have you read that one? It's a classic. And it's really great because it's just like these one-pagers of, I like to use it as a morning study book. And one of the days in particular, he says that it's like purposefully read things or expose yourself to things that are the opposing of your personal belief system. Right. So he was talking about how he and his wife he's passed away now, but how he and his wife had both the most liberal newspapers and then the most conservative newspapers. And he would on purpose, be exposed to both just to feel it, it, to know it, to widen the lens, and then to go out into the world and have a freshness to be able to greet people with. Right.
And be able to live his life and speak his truth, whichever paper it may came from, right? Like that day, right? Yeah. No, it's beautiful. Actually, right now, I'm talking with a girl who's a vegan. And so here I am, Mr. like rewilding, like hunter guy, like, out there hunting white-tailed deer right now and things like that back home. And it's just like, I think some of my friends like, what? Like, how's that even possible? And it's just like, it's not going to define me or the connection or whatever the things that we have in common, right? It's just this, it just is what it is. And I think by embracing that, you can find like true happiness and like health and everything beyond, right? So it's so important.
Yeah. Shawn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This has been so amazing. We've covered so many things. I want to be able to let people know how to find you and when your podcast launches, how to find that podcast. For sure. So you can find me on Instagram. It's ReWild My Bio. And then on Twitter, I'm at Shawn Slade. And the website is being constructed as I speak. So that will be rewildmybio.com. So you can check that out. I'm hoping to have like the first episode out in January. So I've got some work to do here now. But thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much, Shawn. Get me ready for the podcast. Have a beautiful ceremony tonight. Thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.